Today I'm going to show you how to make an animal pouch that can be donated to the Reptile Park for them to house and keep warm all the little animals that they rescue during spring. You'll need 2 pieces of fabric. I've got mine laid out here right side up. The right side is the fabric side that we intend to see at the end, so you'll see this side is not quite as fluffy. And on the outside fabric, and I've chosen flannel today, the wrong side of the fabric is not as pretty, so it's the wrong side of the print. Okay, what we're going to do is fold both pieces in half along its length and match up the edges. We're going to pin these before we then stitch them. Now this design from an animal pouch means that we have no raw edges seen once we're finished. Now, when you're pinning edges together, it's really important to check that they're even and matched up from both sides. If you only check one side, you may find that you haven't actually lined up the edges very much at all, which will result in perhaps not going through both layers of fabric when you stitch. So the pin goes down and then back up through, all the way down to the edge, and I'm going to check it again. I'm going to flip it over and check, yep, all of my edges are fairly well lined up. I'm going to turn it around and I'm going to do the other side, again checking that they're lined up. Adjust it if you find that they aren't lined up. Okay, so that's the inside layer. This is the outside layer of my pouch, and I'm going to do exactly the same, pinning down those 2 edges. Now if you have fabric and it's easier to cut out so that there's a seam along the bottom as well, that's perfectly fine. In that case you would pin here, here and here. Or you might find that it's easy to cut it out in a piece this way that folds that way, so you'd stitch here and here but not here. As long as both pieces end up the same width and the one you intend to have on the outside about 2 to 3 inches longer, it will still work for you. Now the reason that we have the outside of the pouch longer is so because when we attach the inside and the outside, we actually have the edge of the outside piece rolling into the inside to make a little border, and so it needs that extra length to curl in. Other side. Now what have I forgotten to do on that other side? What have we got to do? Okay, that's right, we've got to check the other side and that they're all matched up nicely. Good, I might put one more pin just in there. And I'll keep going on this side. Okay. Alright. Once you've pinned both sides of both pieces, you're ready to go to the machine. Take your pin cushion with you and set yourself up sitting at your sewing machine. Now, if you thread up both the top thread and the bottom thread in white for the zaccaron or the zigzag, you'll be ready to go. Now, I'm going to adjust mine so it lines up with 1.5 on the stitch plate, or for me mine says 5, but yours will say 1.5, and I'm going to check that my stitch length is at 2.5. Yours will be the same but on a little slide. Okay, I'm going to turn my machine on because I'm ready to start. I'm going to start a little way in from the edge, so my foot's about 3/4 on the fabric, 1/4 off at the back. I'm going to hold both of my threads. I'm going to take out my first pin and I'm going to put my foot down until I've completed 3 or 4 stitches. Then I'm going to press the reverse lever to go back to the edge of the fabric. Yours will be a button here. Mine's a little thing I push across at the top here. All the way back and then coming forward. Now if you are new, if this is your first or second time at sewing something, I recommend using the hand wheel to gain really nice, smooth control. So this is ideal for year 6s, gives you nice control, very easy to adjust where you're stitching. Also make sure that your nose is behind the needle to give you the greatest control. Time to take that pin out. Always stop when you take the pins out to give you greater control. beginning, we went back and forwards a few times to lock the stitches. We're going to do now that at the end, so come almost all to the end, press the reverse lever, go back for no more than a centimetre, and then back off that edge. When you lift it out, make sure you take up levers at the top, which will allow you to easily pull the fabric out to the side, and trim your threads close to the edge of the fabric. I'm also going to go back and trim the threads where I started to keep things nice and tidy. Nice straight line of stitching there. I'm going to flip over and we're going to do the second side. This time I'm going to start from the bottom or where the fold is, so that I continue with the fabric on the bulk to the left. 3/4 of the fabric under my foot, lining up with 1.5 on your stitch plate. Hold your threads, take a few stitches, reverse lever to go back, and then continue forward again. Use your hand wheel for great control. Okay, you're turning that anti-clockwise on the side in order to go straight. If you're feeling a little bit more confident and you are getting a straight line, if you're not getting a straight line, go back to the hand wheel. Nothing wrong with that. If you're getting a nice straight seam, go back to using your foot pressure very gently. You may like to check that on your foot pedal you've got it set to slow, as there are 2 speed settings. One is fast, one is slow. Swap it from one to the other if you're not sure which one it's on, and see how the machine responds. Reversing again, take a lever is up, pull out to the side, trim those threads where you've just finished and where you started. Okay, so we have now completed the outside section of the pocket. I'm just going to clip the corners, which means I'm going to take out some of the seam allowance, or the little bit of fabric past the seam, just up to the stitching on the corners. That just reduces a little bulk and will help it to sit nicer when we're finished. Now we can sit this aside for a moment as we complete the inside, the furry section that will be for the animal to curl up in. Okay, let's do exactly the same again, lining up with 1.5, press the foot down, hold those threads. It's really important you hold those threads. You'll get a nasty tangle if you don't. Reverse stitching, and then coming forward, let's take out that pin. Coming forward, taking out the pin. I'm just going to adjust my stitch length a little because this fabric is a bit bulkier. Stitch length needs to be small for fine fabric and longer for a bulky fabric, and as this fabric is a bit bulkier, I'm just going to adjust it to 3, and that will be fine. Okay, nice straight seam, go slow, use the hand wheel if needed, reverse at the end. Back stitching should only be 1 centimetre in length. When you are done, take a lever to the top, use your foot, press the foot lever to raise the presser foot, and then trim your threads. Make sure you pop those in the bin as you go, or at least a little pile to be taken to the bin. Okay, let's pop it under, lining up with 5, holding those threads, couple stitches forward, reversing to the edge of the fabric and then coming forward. Using that hand wheel if you feel more confident that way, there's no rush. Coming forward, pin out, same again. Using your hands to guide the fabric and to keep it lined up, your eye should be focusing on the stitch plate. And reversing to do your back stitch. 1 centimetre in length, make sure you take up levers at the top, press the foot up and then trim your threads. Well done. You're about halfway now. Again, trim some of that seam allowance. This time, however, we're going to trim it at the top as well, as it's going to create bulk in the next step that we do. Alright, so I'm just going to take out a little bit of that there. So in the seam allowance, it shows up a little bit more on this fabric because we've got a darker colour. For about 2 centimetres, we're going to diagonally cut up until we almost meet that stitch line. Alright, now being the inside, we're going to turn this one right side out. All you need to do is open up the pocket, reach down to the bottom and pull it out. And tuck both hands inside, poke out those little corners, boop, 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 and then curl over that top edge. Okay. Whenever you're sewing, if you want to get nice, tidy sewing without seam allowances, which is these bits here, the little flappy bits past your stitching, which help it to stay together. If you don't want to see those in your finished product, you always put right sides together. So now I'm going to pop this polar fleece pocket inside this flannel one, so that the right sides touch, and the right sides are those that we want to see at the end. So this zaccaron, or this zigzaggy one, is the one we want to see at the end, and this fluffier one here is the one we want to see. So they should touch when I pop that inside. Now this is probably the most difficult part, or close to, and we're going to match up where those seams are. So seam there, seam here. I'm going to match them up, and I'm going to open that seam allowance, and I'm going to pin. Now I'm going to stitch these together from the polar fleece side, so I'm going to put my pins in from that side too. Now I'll do that again on the other side so you can see it a little bit better. So I've made that a bit hard for you. So open up that seam allowance, press it flat, open out your seam allowance on this side as well, and then pin. And pin. Now we're going to do that all the way around that top edge, and we're going to then designate a gap. So make sure that again those edges are matching up as you pin them around. Okay. Probably pin every 1.5 to 2 inches as you go around that circle. Now some of you will have different size pouches, so you need to play it by ear as to how many pins around you would go. Think about that distance is good. Too much bigger and you'll find that they will shift. Now I need to leave a gap. So soon we're going to turn this right side out, and we need a hole through which to turn it. So I'm going to use double pin, so 2 pins very close together on either side of the gap that I intend to leave. So that means this section will be not stitched and the remainder will. Next we're going to line this up on the machine, starting at the double pin closest to you. Under there. Now even though that's a circle, it is actually straight stitching. Okay, line it up again with 1.5, put your presser foot down and make sure you can find those threads to hold. Pop out your first double pin, put your needle down, couple stitches and back stitch. Okay, now before I stitch, see how I've got this big section here that's in my way? I'm going to simply pull that around so it sits flat in front of me. Oh, I didn't put a couple pins in there, I need a couple more pins. There we go. Alright, and see now I've got that straight section out in front of me. So don't worry about it up the back, just in front of the foot's what we're looking at. Okay, when you come to the seam, make sure it's opened out nice, sitting flat underneath your presser foot. Make sure those pins come out before you stitch over them. So when the pin comes to the front of the foot, like that one, stop, pull your pin out, straighten up the fabric by pulling it around, and then you'll be able to keep going. Okay, pin out, pull the fabric around, make sure those edges are lining up. Okay, now I've just raised my presser foot there to make sure that my presser foot is going to sit up and over that seam allowance here that's bulky, so that it doesn't get stitched in the wrong direction. That just adds the unnecessary bulk, and we don't want that. Right, we're almost back to that double pin. When you get to it, take it out, come forward just a tad, and then back stitch. Take a lever up the top, pop the presser foot up, and trim those threads as close to the stitching as you can without cutting your fabric, of course. Let's do the same way we started off. Always a good habit to trim both ends at once. Okay, so now we have a loop of stitching around the top of those 2 edges, and I'm just, oops, see there, that got a bit caught. I'm just going to trim the seam allowance just a tad, again to reduce the bulk near that seam allowance, or sorry, where the seams are, so that as we do the next step, it should sit nice and flat the whole way around. Yeah, that's looking good. Alright, let's turn it right side out. So that gap that we left, open it up, pop your hand through, grab the bottom of the polar fleece and pull. Now that looks like a big mess, but don't worry, it's going to look better. I'm going to put my hand through and grab the bottom of the flannel and pull that through too. And now you see that my fabrics are looking happier and prettier. I'm going to turn out the corners, so I'm going to pull those little pointy bits up and wiggle it a little bit until that's sitting nice and pointy. Yes, that one's good. Same for this side. Nice. Alright. Now what we're going to do, and this is probably a bit tricky, we're going to open up. We'll grab the sides of the section where the two different fabrics join and then push the polar fleece down and inside. So now we've got one pocket, different colour on the inside, different colour on the outside. We're going to do that, or we're going to push it down until we've got about 1.5 centimetres of fabric pulled down to the inside. See how you've got a little section there? Cool. Now you want it so that the seam allowance inside there is pressed up. Now that's a little bit tricky. You might need someone to help you with that, but you should feel nice and flat here and a little bit bulkier in there. And I'm going to pin that. Okay, so we're going to go through the folded over section twice, once and twice, so that will stay. We're going to go all the way around. I always like to pin the sections with the seam allowance first and then fill in the gaps. Okay, so I'm going to go a quarter way around. Yep, that's looking good. Okay. Now you may like to use a rule to check that that's folded over the same amount the whole way around. Okay, once you've done a lot of sewing, it becomes a little bit easier by eye to get distances the same. So use a measure to check that, to get it more accurate. Okay. Oh, almost there, guys. Only got one more row of stitching and then we're done. Well done. Okie dokie. And all those little animals will be very nice and snug. Okay. Now when you get to the section where you'd left the hole, it should more or less sort itself out, but if it doesn't, open it up and push the polar fleece up and then pull the fold of the flannel down. And again, we need to pin that in place. Just put the pins really close to the edge at the bottom so that it's holding it nice and securely. Okay, and that's more or less what it's going to finish up like. Oops, just got my pins all tangled in the thread on my machine. That's not a good move. Try and avoid that if you can. I'm going to have to rethread my machine. Sorry guys. Trim that to make it easier. Oh. Through the needle. There we go, and under the foot. Alright, so that's pretty much what it's going to look like when we're done. So we're just going to push those corners out inside so it sits nice and flat. Bit of bulk in the side there, that's alright. Okay, find one of your seam allowances and we're going to line our foot up over it. So you'll press a foot, the left hand side should line up perfectly with the edge of where the fabric changes from the outside fabric to the inside fabric. And on your machine you want to change your needle position so that it comes over as close to the left of the hole that's in your presser foot as possible. Now on your machine you're going to have two little slides. The one at the top, if you push full to the right, will automatically bring the needle to that position. Alright, we're going to go again around very similarly to what we did last time, except instead of looking at the 1.5 we're going to look at the left hand side of the foot and keep it matched up with where the fabric changes from one type to the other. Now the advantage to this method of making an animal pouch is that that gap that we left is hidden by this top stitch that we're doing that goes the whole way around, so it's not obvious how it's being constructed and which bit's been done when and what we've actually done to hide the seam allowances, etc. It's nice and tidy and professional looking. So looking at the left hand side of the foot. Okay. And back stitching when you get to where you started, just a little bit. Alright, take up lever at the top, pull it out to the side, and let's trim off those threads as close to the edge of the fabric as we can so we don't get any daggy little hanging threads. Okay, I can turn my machine off now because we're done. And that's my finished pouch. Okay, nice and tidy, little row of stitching around the top. Cute little border on the inside and snuggly as can be down on the inside. How cute and cuddly is that? Thank you.